watcher guys, how you all doing? I hope you're all doing all right on your side of the internet, whatever time. If you're watching this in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening, if you're having dinner, watching this in bed, on the shitter. Some of you are watching this right now on the shitter. As you guys know, I've been very critical on apps. Now, yes, I used to use apps in the past, I didn't really know much about anything. I just kind of followed the crowd and just used whatever. But now, and then I started to think a bit more critically, years ago, I started to be a bit more critical, started to think about things, if these apps are really legit or not. But anything to do with the paranormal, I started to be more critical about things. And then I came up with my very well-known opinions on apps, which you've probably seen in these previous videos, and the most recent one I done on Josh's From Hope Paranormal's app, where I found the raw audio. Long story. If you want to go watch that video, then it'll be linked somewhere in the description. But I've never been shy about my opinions on the paranormal, never been shy about my opinions on apps. So this is a challenge which I kind of wanted to throw out to you, and even if it doesn't conjure up anything, which I doubt it will, but I hope it does encourage people to think a bit more critically about apps and just don't believe the apps, what you see and hear at face value. Actually be a bit more critical and think about it a bit more. So that's what this video is about. So without further ado, let me show you this. There will also be some suggestions from Life After Life Productions, Sam over there, who commented on the community post I did about this particular topic, which I wanted to address tonight. And it's a really good suggestion, and I'll also leave his comment at the end of the video just so you can have a read of it. So before I get into this whole challenge thing, suggestions, whatever you want to call this, whatever this is about, I'm just going to go into, my thoughts about apps, why I think you should be a bit more critical, and my suggestions going forward. So without further ado, let's get straight on to this. So as we all know, a lot of people use Spirit Box apps as they have the assumption and the belief which they can communicate just like radios can. Except we do not know how Spirit Box apps truly work. They are programmed to be a certain way anyway, and we do not know what is within the banks. There could be anything within the banks. So the reasons why I cannot trust Spirit Box apps are as follows. Firstly, you're taking somebody else's word for it, that when they say there's no words, sentences, scary sounds, or whatever programmed into this app. Are you just gonna take their word for it? For me, that's not good enough. I have to be able to see these banks to know, I have to see these banks to know that they are truly free of all words, any sounds, sentences, because when they say there's no words or phrases programmed into this app, you're just taking somebody's word for it. And for me, that's not quite good enough, and with trust as well. As I said, apps are programmed to work a certain way anyway. It's nothing like a radio. Even though a lot of people will say that some of these apps run off of internet radio, we don't know that's true either. If it is true that they do run off internet radio, what radio stations do they run on? Are they paranormal stations? Are they religious stations? You see what I'm getting at? But the other thing is as well, is that when it comes to apps, I believe you should be able to cross-reference them. Now, how do you go about cross-referencing an app or any response which you get? Well, that's where this whole challenge thing comes into play, and I'm going to explain this to you now. I believe, my only personal opinion, if anybody has any suggestions, then please chuck them in the comments, but this is not completely my suggestion. This is mostly to do with Strangely Paranormal, who came up with this idea, which I wish I came up with this idea, so I can't take full credit for this. So the suggestion was by him to make all these sound banks and everything within the banks, and with also the programming, the coding. Yes, it's a bit of a pain in the ass, but release everything, the banks, the coding, the programming, everything to do with the app, make it open source and freely available for people online. So that way you can have people cross-reference any response they get. So say if they're asking questions to a Spirit Box app and they get, "Hello, I am John," then they can go through all these sound banks to see if "Hello, I am John" is in these sound banks. If it is in the banks, then it's just the app working. And if it's not, then maybe you might have something. So where the audio manipulation theory comes into play is that truly, his apps are programmed to work a certain way anyway. But if you have something, if you maybe get a response which goes completely against the programming as to how this thing works, if you can understand everything that's in the app, then you can hopefully have a better understanding as to, if it goes against the programming of that specific app, if nothing about any responses which you got is within this app and within these sound banks, then maybe you got something. And also, whatever the banks are, to have the banks up on the internet, up onto a website or whatever, and they're completely full, unedited, and people can switch them about and fiddle them any way they like to see if they have a response or not. Now, this you can do yourself, which I will get into what Sam's comment was. I'll get into that shortly. But I just feel that is a very good, transparent way to do this. And also for not just app makers, but anybody else to do this as well who wants to try. You can, what Sam was saying in these comments about, you can make your own sort of sound files in a way. However, there is some conditions with these particular apps. The conditions which I would have is to have no full words or sentences, no internet radio at all, so it doesn't need internet to work, and no false positives, which, oh my god, false positives, I can go on about that forever, but there we go. There's things which even Dark Paranormal Investigator has told me about, which is EVP Maker, which you can have a look at online, which is a really cool thing. It's sort of like sounds, things like that. I encourage you to check it out. Like I said, for me, I can't just take somebody's word for it when they say this app has no words or sentences into it, because how do you know they're not just fibbing? Okay, now a quick interject into this video while I just read Sam's comment. I'm going to put it up on the screen next to me, but also I'm going to read it out for you just in case if you don't have time to read it or whatever, or you're listening to me in your headphones. Life After Life Productions, that's not difficult to prove. Spirit and Box phone apps are basically sound banks which anyone can make up. Unlike the apps, if you make the sound bank yourself, you can always have a raw copy filed away in case something strange comes up. This is true. Then you can compare the app session to the original raw audio. I have made a number of files and used them in a radio, and I have that plays SD card files rather than using a phone app, which may or may not be honest. The problem is using self-made banks will only work on a YouTube video. If the person is honest and is serious about the paranormal and not just a YouTube show off with an attention seeking in mind, there is no point asking people to prove these things to you. In my opinion, I believe there is. If people are so interested in figuring out the Spirit Box apps work, or how they work I should say, just make some sound banks and test them and change them over time, like speed, pitch, to figure out what works best. It can't be perfected overnight and it takes time. People always want answers straight away nowadays, and the paranormal just don't work like that. People always have to put in the research and work into it. All answers don't come easy, and if someone is a paranormal researcher or an ITC researcher, they shouldn't have to ask others to prove certain things. In my opinion, not just relating to us, but I believe they kind of should. The best way to find out is to learn as much as possible by doing things yourself. Yes, this is true. People won't just hand things out on a plate. Definitely not. There are a few sides to all of this: faith, belief, science, and too many people base all the paranormal on faith and a belief system, but there has to be a balance. So that is the whole comment by Sam, and really good comment, really good things to take into account. Personally, when it comes to, asking people to prove themselves, I mean, pretty much, I think you should. In my opinion, you should, ask for proof. Because you want to know if it's real or not. Not just with these apps, but I'm talking about with anything associated to the paranormal. So personally, that's just my opinion, Sam. That is just my opinion, so I hope you understand. And with going back to the raw files, that's pretty much what I was going to say beforehand, which is a really good idea. And plus, if you have full control over that as well, if people were able to cross-reference, their responses and so on, and then maybe it can be a really good way going forward. But I personally think, you know, if it's going to be like open source, for example, so everybody can view it. Although when, you know, people say about these apps which are already out, let's just take Necrophonic or the HSB-1, I think, HSB-1, or just Signal app, whatever it's called, Banshee. With all these apps, I can personally guarantee that none of them will release, you know, the original audio that goes into them. And, you know, Josh, who was saying that the audio was something completely different, and then I went online and it took me hours, but I eventually found the original audio, which was not what he said it was. So, you see what I mean? So I'm saying that people can just lie about what the audio banks are. But whereas, you know, there's people that have gone out, found these things. I mean, you remember the whole Huff Paranormal thing where he had the whole Chosen thing, carried on with that Chosen narrative, knew it wasn't paranormal when it was just the ASMR which was uploaded into the app itself, you know, running forwards and backwards. You remember, it's quite a famous video on EVP Paranormal Science, although I believe Order of Magnitude now has the video, but then those two had a bit of a barney about views or something like that. I don't know the situation, but anyway, it's on Order of Magnitude's channel, and I will try and link that down below, and if I forget to link it down below, then please just put in the comments, hey Jack, you forgot to put the video. So there you have it. Allow people to cross-reference this app, you know, put the programming out there, put everything that is inside this app, the coding and everything. Yes, it might be a bit of a pain and a bit of finicky to understand, but I believe, you know, if your app is 100% honest, then put it out there. Put everything to do with the app out there. Upload the raw files. Upload what, you know, upload what the files are and so on. You know, state if there's any words or anything in that. But then again, as Dark Paranormal Investigator said to me when I was talking about this idea, you know, they can just hide certain banks, they can hide certain things, you know, and plus, even if you're thinking a bit more critically about apps, even see about the frequency of some of the sounds or words which keep coming out. Now, how frequently do they come in? Because if it's a sound bank which is playing, you know, right the way through, then there's got to be a frequency of responses which will come out every time, which is probably already pre-programmed into the app. However, I'm not completely dismissing apps. There has been some things which have come out of apps which I have been personally very stunned by. So I think, you know, I'm open to it, but the only thing is there needs to be more proof behind them. But until then, I'll stick to the old school methods of using the good old radio, which seems to be, you know, getting just fine results on its own. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this. I'm sorry for my head sweat, but it's quite hot in this room. And I hope you take up this challenge. And if you don't take up this challenge, which I don't think anybody will, at least I hope it encourages you to think a bit more critically about the apps. And Sam, thank you so much for the comment and the suggestions. Also, you know, I will leave that comment, you know, on the side. So thank you very much. Good luck. And I'll see you guys very soon, and be a bit more critical.